Welcome GRD 121 Computer Graphics for a little overview intro, and this will probably be part of a series of different ones based on what direction I go as far as what I show you in terms of text and different things like that. But it's just a basic little overview of Gravit. When you start up in Gravit, you can have an infinite canvas, meaning you're not limited to any specific size. You can work in inches, you can work in pixels, which I think it is by default. You just won't have a page indicated. Now you could, if you want to, if you've worked in Illustrator before, you might want to work on a portrait size like that, and you could start off like that in inches. That's fine. We've done that already. You can do that. If you wanted to change the size, if you're like, oh, I wanted it landscape, I think you could go over here and just make it landscape that way. So you could change it like that if you wanted to change that. And you could change the width and height over here. I don't know if you could change increments because it's already in inches. You might have to, if you're like, oh man, that's not what I wanted, just close it up and don't save and start over. And then if you wanted to start over, I'll just make it 8.5 by 11 again. And there it is. But you can change the landscape here and rotate it around. I'm not familiar with all this stuff. Trim canvas, clip content. I'm not familiar with all the tools here in Gravit because I haven't used it. I used it last spring for a little bit. A couple things I just want to point out here. These are your rulers. Obviously your ruler going across, your horizontal, and your vertical going down. They start with 0, 0 at the top like most programs do. If you don't want to see your rulers for whatever reason, go to View and go to Canvas. This is where they have all the different things on the page. Go to Canvas and just turn off Show Rulers, and then you don't have them. But there's nothing wrong with having them on, I think. Leave your rulers on. And also what rulers are helpful for, if you ever need to put guides, if you ever need to line up things on your page, you could go in the ruler and drag out guides onto your page. If you ever had to set up something at a certain place or a certain width or whatever, we'll get to that later. But these are guides that are kind of like in the old days, we used to use a blue pencil and draw on a piece of paper or Bristol board to do that, to just be like a guide for us. Even the margins, even if you just needed margins on here, you could do that. Those are guides. And I'm not sure if they lock or not. I'd have to go over here to Canvas, and I don't see where you could lock guides. Maybe they don't lock, but you can hide them. If you didn't want to see your guides, you can uncheck and hide them. They even have shortcuts too. And they're still there, so if you want to put them back, if you just needed to look at your design and then you wanted to come back and then put your guides on again, you could show the guides. So those are guides. If you don't want them, you could drag them off. If you ever worked in Illustrator, if you put guides on your page and you don't have them locked, they'll actually move around when you grab another object. So I don't find that beneficial. I think this works like the way they should work, just in the background. So anyway, that's guides. We have our layers panel over here. Let's see what they call it. They call it the panel. And you know why they don't call it the palette? Because Adobe has that term copyrighted. So they can't call it a palette. They have to call it a panel. So there's your layers panel. You could turn it off or turn it on. And over here, this is, I think, is called your inspector panel, that you could turn that off and on if you ever need more space, and I think I did that in the previous exercise. So I'll leave them on for now. And you have your layers area here. You have your page area. You can make multiple pages, which is really nice. It took years for Illustrator to be able to do that. You can make multiple pages here, which is nice. So if you had a couple designs, you had one on one page, another on another page, you could do that over here. It's really easy. And I'll go over a couple things there. Let me just start with some basic stuff first, basic shape kind of stuff, even though we've done stuff. When you draw a rectangle, you're just going to click and drag. If you need to see the size of it, that stuff's all over here. You can control the position of it with the X and Y. If you need to move it, if you needed to move the X, if you need to go in here and move it over to 0, that's going to move it over to the side of the page. If you need to put it at the top, you can put a 0. That moves it to the top of the page. And it looks like it measures everything from the upper left, and I haven't figured out how to change that yet. Like in Illustrator, they have a transform palette where you could click and say, put the middle of this here. But keep in mind, they have these things. You could put that in the center, you could put that in the middle, as long as you have one object. If you have more than one object, they'll do them together in relationship to each other. And then also, just with this one shape here, you know this already, but if you need to fill it, it has a gray fill by default. You just go into this little circle here, and give it a fill. You can choose a color from this color picker, or you could choose a color down here, or you could put numbers in here if you're familiar with hex and things like that. You can give it a gradient, you can give it a linear gradient. There it's going from green to black. See, it's going from green to black. And these things, remember, you could kind of shorten them so that it's a lot of green before it starts going green to black. Or you can even drag it over here. That means the green starts over here and you see like a dark green in here. Or you could change the angle of it and make it go from green to black over here. It's a little easier, I think, for the linear than the radial. It was weird what has that little like 2 lines coming down, but once you get familiar with that. But I'll show you that as well. Here's my rectangle here. And in my layer palette, it's called a rectangle. And there's no special layer that it's on. It's just a rectangle layer object that it's on. And if I went and made a circle or an ellipse, I'll make one here. Now this is going to come out in the same color. Now if I wanted to change this color, I'll just go in here. Whether it's a gradient or a solid fill, I could go in here and make it a solid fill. It's still doing a gradient because it's not just a solid fill. If you just go to color fill, now it's just a normal fill. So remember to turn that off. And if you wanted a gradient, I'll use a radial. Remember we had that thing where it goes from one color to another, and this is a center. So if let me zoom in here, I'll do Command plus, and if you're on Windows, do Control plus. And remember, hold the space bar to kind of pan around. You could pan around and kind of move your window in its area if you need to move. So, and I have to click on it again. Notice that I have to do anything, I have to select an object. It's different than Photoshop. You have to use your pointer tool and click on it to select it. So if I select this shape here and I want to edit the gradient, I could go in here, and if I wanted a yellow to green gradient, I could go on this side and make that yellow, and I could go on this side and click on there. Don't add another one. You can add another one. You can click there and it could be purple. You know, I could have yellow to purple to black, and if you don't want it, I think you could just drag it down to get rid of it, or there might be a little trash can there that might get rid of it, but I think you could just drag it off of there. So you can click here to add something, like if you wanted blue in the middle, you can add it. If you don't want it, just drag it down. Illustrator does that too. So we have our yellow and black gradient. Let me make it red or green. I think I said I was going to do it. Now we have a yellow to green, and if you think this green is too light, just click on that and then make it a darker green. Now it's a darker yellow to a darker green. And these were a little confusing. Some people had problems with these. If you want to move the whole highlight around, you can hover over with your four-sided arrow and do that and move that around, or just leave it in the middle. What these things do, they kind of shorten it vertically, which I'm not sure why you would do that other than for specific kind of effect looking things. But you could shorten the gradient kind of in two directions. You could bring this in. So if you wanted a smaller highlight, you could bring that in, I guess. And then if you hover over here with the four-sided arrow, you can move that. But if you start moving these things around, it gets a little weird. They start moving around. You know, this is changing the yellow to green on that side. This will change it on that side. So it's a little odd sometimes. I find the radial in all programs, not just here, but in Illustrator as well. It's no picnic working with the gradients. You really have to take some time to get used to them and decide what you want. But anyway, that's a gradient color there. Now let me zoom out a second. I have two shapes on my page, ellipse, rectangle. If I grab this and put it here, it's behind it. It's behind it because the rectangle is below it on the layers. If I want to drag this up, I could go over here. They have this like bring to front, bring element forward, bring to front, send to back. You've probably seen that in other programs. And you can do that, or you could just drag this rectangle above it. And now it's above it. Now the rectangle is above that. If you wanted to group these, meaning you wanted them to move together, you could highlight both of them. And again, I'm just using my pointer tool. And this is the group tool, and that's kind of like an operation. Operations are under modify. So if you went to modify, you'll probably see group there, group selection, and I'll group it there, or I could have grouped it here too. This is an ungroup. They have a little icon there for ungroup. So this is moving together. And if you remember from one of the other exercises, you can still get inside a group. You can go over here, click on the rectangle. Now it's selected. That's one way to select the rectangle within a group. Or right on the page, if you click once and then click again, it knows that you're trying to get in that group. It's like you're knocking on the door of their private club, and you're getting in here and you're like, excuse me, I want to speak to the rectangle. And you have to knock twice. So you knock twice here to get to the rectangle. And then if you want to go change your color and you're like, hey, rectangle, I want you to just be a blue color. You can go up here, make it color fill, and just give it a blue color. Now you have a blue rectangle, and it's still part of that group. So you can still move it all around as one group. And another thing I want to point out too, under view, because we're talking about vector art here, all of these things are paths. So if I go to view and I go into something called outline view, it's like an X-ray. If I go into outline view, that shows me the paths that are there on the page. And sometimes that's helpful, sometimes it's not, but where it's helpful, if I go back to regular view, if I ever accidentally started creating a bunch of shapes that were white, you know, if I drew a whole bunch of these, and let me make a whole bunch of copies here. I'm doing a drag copy where you hold down your Option key or your Alt key and you just move it. with the arrow, if I highlighted these and I made them all white, now I can't see them. How would you know they're there? Unless you kind of highlighted everything on the page, and there I could kind of see them. But if you use your view, outline view, it's like an X-ray. You could see everything that's there. You could say, oh, I have these. In Illustrator, it's very easy to make like weird text things and shapes that you don't even know are there. So that's what that is. You'll see that in all vector programs, outline view. It's like an X-ray of shapes that you can see. You see that we have all these rectangles here. Like, let me highlight these, and I'll just give them a different color so I could see them. I'll make them this light blue. They're light blue rectangles. If I wanted to make a layer group, I could go here, make a layer group, and I'll call it light blue. They're the light blue rectangle group. They're going to be in that group. I'll hit enter. If I wanted to select these, I could select this and hold shift and click, shift click. I have all four selected, and they're here over here as well. Now, it was hard to see which one that was because it's just called rectangle. If I want these part of that light blue layer group, I can just drag them right over top. And now, I didn't do that right. I put them above. Let me drag that right on top, right when you see it highlighted with that red color and a plus. Leave go. Now they're inside there. And now if I open this up, there's the four rectangles. And then if I see they're in there, I could use the eyeball to kind of turn off and on, or I could lock it. So that's the light blue group. They're in their own layer group. It's like a folder that helps organize shapes. So if I wanted these in a special layer group called, I'll make a layer group, and I'll call this layer group shapes. These are just the first shapes that I made here. If I wanted to put them in there, you can just select them over here. They're easier to find over here since there's only two of them. And you can still shift click on a layer or on their object layer and drag it in here right on top. Not in between, because you can see there's a little red line and a dot. That's in between. That's just going to put them in there. But if you want to drag them in the shapes layer folder, or layer group as they called it, go right on top, and now they're in there. And now there's my rectangle, and if I'm not sure, there it is. So that's how you organize things with layers. We've already done that in some exercises, but it doesn't hurt to go over a little bit more. So one other thing I'll just mention here, I cannot add borders to a layer folder. I have to highlight all of these and go in here. And now if I put a border on, I could hit plus, and it's the black border here. I'll go up a little bit. There's the border that's on there. And they even have border options. So if you wanted the border on the outside, they have a thing here, position. You could put it on the outside or in the middle. That's really cool, especially when we work with text, because that's helpful to make text more readable when you put outlines on them. So there's a lot of options here for borders, which we'll get into later, and I haven't had a chance to even look at them too much, but some of these I really like. There's some nice options in here. There's a lot of things I like about the software. There's things, you know, that are obviously it's free, so we have limitations as far as the effects and things, but there's a lot of cool things we could do. So I think that's it for now. I don't want to just ramble on because I didn't really prepare anything too formal. I just wanted to get you started with some of this stuff. We are going to have a place to place images. It's called Place Image, but we already found out we can already just copy and paste an image. We did that with our Warren logo already. So that's just a couple things there. Just make sure anything you do, you have to select it first with the pointer tool. Again, when you're working on stuff, you have to go to save. If you didn't save it yet, it's going to force you to save it to the cloud. And I'll just call this sample because I'm not really doing much here, and just hit save. And it just saves it as this Gravit file. And make sure that it syncs. Again, if you share before it syncs, it may not be updated. So now it's saved. And now it's saved in there to the cloud. And I think I'll stop there. That's a little intro. I'll probably add more to these, but I'll call that a little intro overview of Gravit so far. So hopefully that helped a little bit. If not, I'll record another video that does something else. And I will go over specific things as we get to them in Gravit.